Welcome to Off the Bookshelf, a program where we meet Christian authors and talk about their books. Today's guest is Karla Akins, and she's the author of the book A Pair of Miracles, a story of autism, faith, and determined parenting. Karla, welcome to Off the Bookshelf.
Well, thank you for having me, Greg. I used to live in Lapeer, Michigan.
You're kidding.
No. My first son was born there.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. So how long have you been gone from Lapeer?
Oh, let's see. We lived in Lapeer in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
How long
Okay.
ago was that?
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, good. Well, that's pretty rare that people have a rough idea. Usually if they're not in Michigan, I say, well, we're near Flint, and then they kind of know where we are. But
yes, I lived in Lapeer. We lived in Metamora. I taught at Oxford, in Oxford at a private school, and then we moved to Goodrich.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's great. Well, it's a small world.
I love Michigan. I miss it.
Good. Well, you know what, before we talk about the book, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, well, my husband is a pastor. We've been married 32 years, 32, 33. I always have to count again. And we got married in 1982. How's that? No, that'd be 35 years, wouldn't it?
That's right.
Oh, my goodness. And we have, he has a daughter, and which I helped to raise, which I was just delighted to do so. And also we have two biological sons, and then we adopted twins. And the book is about our precious twins that we adopted.
Very, very interesting. So you adopted, did you adopt them as babies, as newborns?
Yes. We got them straight from the NICU. They were in the neonatal intensive care unit because they were premature. And we were foster parents at the time, and so they were in the foster care system. And we got them straight from the hospital, which was such a huge blessing. You know, not all foster children get to be adopted that way.
Right, absolutely. And so then, did they? We're saying they and them, but they have names,
okay.
right? They have names, right?
We're used to it.
Okay. So, so then you were able to do everything just like with your biological children, as far as naming them and that sort of thing.
Yes, we got to name them, and they have our name, and they're all ours. And you know, that's one thing any adoptive parent will tell you: you don't love them any less than your biological children. I love them just as much. I have no different feelings. You know, I wondered about that, how I would feel, but really, it's just no different. And I forget all the time that they're adopted.
That's very, very cool. Now, the story in the subtitle, A Pair of Miracles, a story of autism. So obviously, at some point, as you were bringing up your twin boys, you realized that developmentally something wasn't right. Is that accurate?
Yes. Actually, they didn't seem right from the moment we brought them home, but I chalked it up to them being premature. They also have other diagnoses of intellectual disabilities and fetal alcohol disorder, which means that their mom drank while they were developing in her womb. And we didn't know that, of course, at the time. We didn't know that what we were getting into. The twins screamed 24/7 for several years. There was no calming them. Their nervous systems were completely messed up. And I knew something wasn't right. But the doctors just kept telling me, well, it was the prematurity. And then later they told me I wasn't spending enough one-on-one time with them. And then after we got the autism diagnosis, I was told to give one of them up because I couldn't possibly raise twins with autism. And part of the miracle is I just showed them wrong.
Oh, that's terrific. We're talking to Karla Akins about her book, A Pair of Miracles, a story of autism, faith, and determined parenting. And at the time, it seems to me that we know more about it, and I certainly don't know a lot about autism, but it had to be hard back then because the general public, of which I am part, knew almost nothing about it.
Right, we didn't know very much. That was the 90s. They were born in 1995, and at that time, autism was rearing its ugly head. Now, that doesn't mean that people with autism are ugly. Please don't misunderstand me. People with autism are every bit as precious and important to God as we are. We're just in these avatars that don't work right sometimes. But our spirits are every bit as healthy. Everybody's spirit is the same as far as health goes if they have Jesus in their heart. And my boys have accepted Jesus, and they've been baptized. But back to the not knowing, yes, we didn't know very much. The only thing I knew about autism was the savant autism, like Rain Man. I didn't have any friends with autism. I didn't know anybody with autism back then. I'd never met anyone with autism, and now autism is so prevalent that it's 1 in 42 boys have autism now, and 1 in 68 children have autism.
That's astounding.
Yes, it's ridiculous, and we need to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that question because I have a friend who's convinced that it's vaccinations that have created this. Have you heard that before? And does anybody have any idea why in the last 20 or 30 years that autism seems to be on the rise?
Some people think that doctors are just diagnosing it better, but I disagree because, like you said, everyone knows somebody that has a child or relative with autism, and we didn't used to. You know, I didn't used to know people like that. I mean, I knew people intellectually disabled. I knew people with Down syndrome, but I didn't know anybody with autism. Ask any teacher, and they'll tell you that something's up. Kids have behavior issues that they never had before, and there are many more students with autism. If it keeps increasing at this rate, by the year I think it's either 2030 or 2035, it'll be 1 in 2 people having autism.
Wow. That's amazing.
Vaccines, as far as vaccines, I think that is possible. I don't know whether or not that was my twins. I think my twins have autism due to other disabilities that they have. But I do know too many parents who said they were fine, and then they got the MMR jab, you know, and our jabs, the shots that we're giving our children. When I was a little kid, I only got 6 shots before I was to go into kindergarten, and now I think it's like 26 shots that kids get before they go into to kindergarten, and that should not be. I mean, that doesn't even make common sense. And the CDC is the CDC tests all other medicines, which if you've covered this already, I apologize, but the CDC covers all other medications with unmedicated versus medicated to learn side effects. They don't ever test the vaccines for that. Yeah, they don't know. Right. They don't know.
That's amazing.
The only other population we can compare it with are, you know, if you study the Amish, they have very, very low incidence of autism.
Interesting.
I mean, it's like almost non-existent.
Huh. Wow.
I'm sorry, I can't give you specific numbers on that.
That's okay. No, it's very, very interesting. I want to come back to Isaac and Isaiah because I want to know what it was like, just if you can give us an overview of what it was like as they grew older and as I assume you and the rest of your family sort of adjusted to this reality.
Right. Well, as I said, you know, they weren't able to modulate as far as the screaming. They didn't have any way of calming themselves down. Very little calmed them because their sensory, they were just overloaded sensory-wise all the time. The primary emotion in autism is fear, and that creates a great level of anxiety. And then you couple that with the fact that all of their senses are overloaded and overstimulated. Imagine walking into a room and the lights look like they're flickering all the time. That's what it's like for a child with autism walking into a room with fluorescent lights, because fluorescent lights flicker, and they can actually see that flicker. It's like they have super powers when it comes to their senses. Showers and baths were terrifying because the water, anything touching their skin, it would hurt. And, you know, a tag would hurt. Of course, they had no way of communicating this because they were nonverbal until they were 7 years old. And kids with autism, when they're really little and they're nonverbal, they need to be worked with early to learn sign language and use picture cards to communicate, because that will help with the behavior a lot. It doesn't take it all away, but it helps a lot with their own frustration of not being able to tell you what they need and what they want. They can't tell you when they're thirsty. They can't tell you when they're hungry. They can't tell you when they're, feeling overwhelmed. And we adjusted by working as a team and praying a lot. And when they were little and they would just scream all the time, my daughter had a really loud car with a bad muffler that we didn't fix because we lived in a really small town in Iowa, and I could hear where she was in town.
Oh, that's funny.
With the car. So she would take them on a ride every evening to get them ready to go down for nighttime. But they didn't sleep well. People with autism don't usually sleep very well without some sort of herbal or psychotropic intervention. And it was exhausting. And, that's why I one of the reasons I wrote the book was to help the public also, not just families, but help loved ones understand what these mommies and daddies go through. The stress level is the same, as studies have shown, is the same as a combat soldier.
Wow.
For these parents.
Right.
It's so traumatic, and it's because we're on alert 24/7. We're on our toes constantly. And that actually creates kind of a post-traumatic stress situation for these parents. They're not going to cognitively reason the same as a typical parent because they're exhausted and they're also so stressed.
Wow. The book is called A Pair of Miracles, A Story of Autism, Faith, and Determined Parenting. Her name is Karla Akins. And Karla, you're in the church, you're in ministry. How did the church do with the boys and reaching out to them? And I have to ask you that because I'm the director of family ministries at my church, and I'm sensitive to this sort of thing.
Oh, I'm so glad you are. Well, the church at first didn't respond real great to us. We were told that we should just spank the autism out of them. We were told that I was asked by someone, well, when you found out they were damaged, why didn't you give them back?
Wow.
And I was also asked by my pastor, did you miss the will of God in adopting the twins?
Huh.
And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I really believe that he just saw our struggle and saw how hard it was. And when we did adopt the twins, people were pretty critical of us because they said, you already have a ministry, you don't need to be doing this. But it was just something we felt called to do. We believe that true religion is taking care of the children and the widows, just as Jesus said. And we wanted to do our part in that. That doesn't make us more spiritual or better than anybody else. It was just our call. And so what I did after when I start the book by talking about how my children were not included in a Christmas program, and I was never told that they weren't going to be included. They were just left off the stage and put in a room with the janitor while all the other kids were up on the stage, and I went to find them, and I went home, and I pouted for a couple of months and refused to go back to church. My husband was on staff at this church at the time, and nobody called to see where I was. I think they were kind of relieved we were gone. I was gone with the boys, and they didn't really know how to handle it back then. I think churches do a better job now, but many can still do better. And while I was laying on my bed, looking at the ceiling, complaining to God about it one Sunday while my husband was at church, I said, God, why don't you do something? He goes, well, why don't you do something?
Wow. And
I felt, it wasn't like an audible voice. It was just a knowing. And so I started a ministry at that church called PALS, and PALS is an acronym for People Assisting Little Souls, where I train people to shadow my children and other children with disabilities so that they could go to Sunday school and children's church with their age mates, and mom and dad could worship with their age mates too. And I think inclusion is really an important concept. Sometimes, yes, it's great to have a special needs class, especially for, if you're working with special needs adults, sometimes that's appropriate. But when they're little, it's great to include them because it teaches both them and children, typical children, how to interact with people who are different. And what a better way to learn that than at church. And it also gives mom and dad that rest time, that time where they don't have to think about care, where they can let their guard down and just be in God's presence and fellowship with their friends without the stress of autism.
The book is called A Pair of Miracles, a story of autism, faith, and determined parenting. Her name is Dr. Karla Akins. She's a professional educator and maybe most importantly to our conversation, a mom. And as we wrap up here, what is life like for you today?
Well, I was told when the twins were small that to hope for them to read and be independent was pie-in-the-sky thinking, and I just better get over it right now. Well, let me tell you, I love pie. And I love eating it in the sky because that's where we're eating it these days. Isaac and Isaiah have a golf cart that they tool around town in, and they can read. They can read the road signs. They still haven't been able to pass a driving test, but we still let them try. And they both have part-time jobs. They still require 24/7 supervision, but they're quite independent. They can make their own lunches, and they read. They can navigate a smartphone and an iPad and a computer, and we're eating lots of great pie.
Oh, that's great. Well, it's an inspiring story. I hope we've given our listeners a good flavor for it. It's called A Pair of Miracles, a story of autism, faith, and determined parenting. And Karla Akins is her name. How can our listeners connect with you and find out more about getting this book?
They can find the book anywhere books are sold, and if they don't have it, they can order it. But it's also online in all the online bookstores. And you can get a hold of me through my website. It's Karla, Karla, Akins, Akins, as in Sam.com. There's contact form on there if you have any questions. I love helping special needs families. And if you need someone to just bounce some ideas off, be sure to get a hold of me. I'd love to visit with you.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. The book, A Pair of Miracles, a story of autism, faith, and determined parenting. Dr. Karla Akins, thanks for being our guest today, and God bless you and your work, and God bless your family as well.
And God bless you, Greg.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, it truly is an inspiring story, and you'll enjoy reading it. It's published by Kriegel. Very easy to find, as she said, and you can go to her website, Karla Akins, and that's Karla with a K, karlaakins.com. Thanks again for joining us today here on Off the Bookshelf.
You've found Gospel 1230, your station in Lapeer.